Welcome to Viewing and Reviewing, where I pull older movies off the shelf, watch them, and let you know if I believe they're worth your time to watch or not. I'm Bobby T. G'day, your online video store clerk, and I'll be searching through my VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray collection to find titles that I think may be interesting to review. Some will be mainstream, but there may be some obscure titles, like this one. In today's episode, I will be reviewing 1984's HBO presentation of Fortress. Not the Christopher Lambert disaster with the same name only a few years later. This Fortress was directed by Arch Nicholson and stars Rachel Ward, Sean Garlick, Rebecca Rigg, and a whole bunch of whiny kid actors, along with Peter Ayer playing a very creepy Father Christmas. Let me read you the DVD cover. One teacher and 9 students, stalked by terror. Fortress is their lesson in survival. It is morning in the one-room schoolhouse in the Australian outback. The young teacher, Rachel Ward of the Thorn Birds and Against All Odds, calls her class to order. It is a day like any other, until the unexpected occurs. 4 masked gunmen break into the schoolhouse, kidnap the teacher and her class, and transport them to the barren countryside. Terrorized and abandoned, the victims come to a shocking realization. Only they can survive themselves from an almost certain death. Now, this movie is loosely based on the 1972 Faraday school kidnapping of a teacher and her class. There are no spoilers in this review, so I can't tell you the outcome of the true story either. But let me start off by saying, I watched this on the HBO loop back in the mid-80s when it first came out, and I believe I saw the world premiere of it actually, and I never forgot it. Now, what was hard was tracking down the DVD. This little sucker's hard to find, so if you ever find a copy, hold on to it. Anyway, about the movie. Rachel Ward is the Australian school teacher, Sally. She's actually living with one of the families with 2 of the older male children being in her class. They formed a bit of a big sister, little brother relationship between she and Sean Garlick's character, named Sid. Sid's about 14 and a very capable outdoorsy boy who hunts a fox in a chicken coop with a rifle before breakfast. As Sally and the 2 boys go off to their one-room schoolhouse, we're introduced to the remaining 7 children, ranging in age of kindergarten all the way up to Rebecca Rigg's very mature-looking 16-year-old Norelle. It's a standard small-town schoolhouse, somewhat like Little House on the Prairie, with all the little kid annoyances and pranks we've seen before, except Laura and Mary Ingalls never met Father Christmas. Now, I gotta say, back in 1984, this movie was gripping. It may seem low budget, even despite HBO's funding, but that's okay. I remember watching the behind-the-scenes snippets that they played on HBO when it first came out, and it looked like a whole lot of fun for the cast. And the kidnappers were really creepy, especially Father Christmas. I mean, that dude must have given the child actors nightmares for years after the film wrapped. He was genuinely evil. Kudos to Peter Ayer, who did the acting. The decades since watching and loving this film have not been kind to it, though, I'm afraid. There are times where the kid actors are a lot whiny, but that should have been forgiven since they are in peril throughout. I do love the arc they all take from going from innocent lambs to cold-blooded victims no more by the end of the film. Rachel Ward, who was more known for sexy vixen roles like Sharky's Machine, Against All Odds, and Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, she did a decent job in her portrayal of the desperate teacher, trying to hold it all together in the face of overwhelming odds. But I finally realized she really wasn't much of an actress in this film. I mean, she let the kids whine way too much. I mean, and how many times did I look at the screen and I yell, "Douse the flashlight" to these whiny kids? I mean, common sense tells you when you're alone in the outback, where there aren't houses for many miles at night, when bad guys are within walking distance, you might as well paint everyone with neon colors and shout, "Hey, kidnappers, we're over here." I mean, thankfully they were being chased by the 3 horny stooges and only 1 legitimate bad guy. But I gotta say, my favorite character, besides Father Christmas, which I can't cheer for, was Sean Garlick playing Sid. The kid was an Australian mini MacGyver, and come to find out, this was his only real feature film role he ever played. I mean, you gotta give the kid props. He saved the entire class, and even taught me a thing or two about the outdoors in the process. So, my overall report card looks like this. Does this film stand the test of time? Yeah, pretty much. This is a seemingly timeless story since it was based on a 1972 true story filmed in 1984 and looks as true to life now in the outback as it would 100 years ago. Survival stories never seem to go out of style. The story, well, it's a fairly basic story. Class is kidnapped by ruffians with shotguns. Class makes a treacherous escape. Thugs return to give chase. Class sets up fortress for defense. Final showdown commences. Not a lot of surprises, but the dialogue's authentic and is definitely worth a see. The cast. Again, I'd like to say this is average, so a C. There was some real novice acting that were pretty much plug and play. Rachel Ward was average as the teacher, which is sad. She was probably a sexier Miss Beadle from Little House, but she wasn't crafty and didn't have any real edge of any kind. Father Christmas was good as the deranged masked kidnapper. Rebecca Rigg was just the right age and body type to make Norell a target for the kidnappers, and Sean Garlick was a revelation as Sid. But those were the highlights. Cinematography. It's the Outback. What are you going to say? It should be an A+. I mean, it's glorious, but, and I will underline that is a big but, the cinematography was below average. And when you have the entire continent of Australia, they had to build 3 very obvious sets for the important scenes. Not good. Not sure if it was the cameras, the budget, it was something, but it didn't feel A-list cinematography. It felt below average. A C-, and that's a shame. It's still lovely, I just wish it was filmed a lot better. The music, it's a D+, and that is being generous. It's kind of misleading to call it music when in reality it was a bit more creepy sound effects slamming you in the face for emotional effect at obvious moments. Nothing at all memorable. The only redeeming quality was the kids singing foreign childhood sing-alongs that were quaint and cute, but that's not a high endorsement of the musical arranger. So, overall, this movie is a C-. It's not a bad movie and definitely worth a watch. It just looks and feels cheap. For an HBO film, I would have expected better. It was even cheap for 1984, but I was more forgiving back then. The story should be considered a classic, especially in this day of horrible child trafficking going on in the world. Based on a true story is always a good thing. I do wish the cinematography was better and the kids weren't allowed to be so whiny and inept for so long. Ugh. But the kidnappers weren't all that bright either, so there was a wash. I do wish Rachel Ward's character would have taken the training wheels off the Sid's character earlier, but that's also just me. And it was from, a mid-'80s HBO film that didn't put out that many films then, and this was a decent watch for that day. So, here are a few other recommendations along the same vein. Walkabout. This is a bit of a no-brainer since it's the story of 2 Australian kids abandoned in the outback near death when they are discovered by an Aboriginal boy who helps them survive in a coming-of-age film. I wonder if that's Sid reincarnated. Who knows? Picnic at Hanging Rock. From 1975 and directed by Peter Weir. Now, admittedly, I have not watched this film, but I do own it, about the disappearance and its aftermath of a bunch of school-age girls in turn-of-the-century Australia. But it is on the Criterion list of films, and I believe with that pedigree, it should be worth a watch. And Revenge from 2017. Ugh. Now, this is a much harsher Australian film about a young woman who's brutally raped by one of her boyfriend's low-life friends. Then they try to murder her to cover up the crime and leave her for the buzzards, only for her to crawl back and whoop some serious criminal ass in very satisfying ways. Now, it's a cringeworthy movie, and crimes like this make my skin crawl, but it has a similar feel to Fortress without the kids or Father Christmas. Well, that's it for Fortress. If you enjoyed this review, please be sure to click the like button below. If you want to keep up to date on my future reviews, please click the subscribe button below. If you want to purchase Fortress on DVD, since it's not on Blu-ray, make sure you get the one that has this cover, not the one with Chris Lambert, because there's definitely a difference. Or if you wish to purchase any of the other titles I've mentioned earlier, please follow the Amazon links below, and I'll get a small residual if you're so inclined. If you have any suggestions for movies you'd like me to review, please leave a comment below, and I'll see what I can do. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, be sure to help others in need, even if you get nothing in return. Good day!